you can make scenario. It's more, here's some tools to help you choose which of those moves you want to make in the scenario you're in, and to help with your planning ahead of time. We know that heated situations create reactivity, like we're humans. That gets us into our knee-jerk reflexes just when we need to most be responsive. So we can make smarter, safer, more strategic choices when we can shift away from being reactive to being responsive. And we want to work on that today. And I want to be super clear. This is not about taming our rage, our grief, our fear. Those are real. They are vital. We need those. They are important, wise, powerful, and healthy, well-calibrated responses to a lot of what we're dealing with. And it can be dangerous to have those in the driver's seat. There have been like a million moments in my life, and I will give you one example. Being in a moment where, in a situation with a lot of armed neo-Nazis who had started stabbing some of our folks, and me and my buddy were moving very quickly towards them. We were already with each other, like shoulder to shoulder, but we really had to take that moment because we were running straight at their knives because the situation was escalating. We had to take that moment to breathe and shift to become more aware of what was going on around us and actually think there's multiple options. What do we need to do here? Similar situation with cops. These are going to be tools that I have practiced a lot to try and get my footing in chaotic situations and to think better about the bigger picture of how we can do our work in sustainable ways. So this is today, y'all. We want to claim our power, our agency, wherever, whenever we can do more of that by being really choiceful. And the tools we're going to look at today are things that we'll practice together for use in lots of scenarios. And with that, it is my very great delight to hand it over to Colin Mendoza from across Frontlines to take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Claire, and welcome everyone. Um, as Claire had shared, this is really about building our internal and also collective resources to be able to sustain ourselves through this authoritarian hellscape that we find ourselves in. Most folks that are on the call are already doing on the ground or remote work, specifically focused on the protection of immigrant community members. And this is really going to be about identifying your tools, your own toolbox to be able to regulate yourself and co-regulate with either your buddy, your team, if you are a observer, to be able to support one another when you're on the ground, but really looking at it from a longer perspective. The purpose of today's training is really to provide those tools for you. And we're going to be covering situational awareness, which is essentially how do we identify threats and come up with mitigation measures in real time, and tactical regulation. How do we stay cool, calm, collected, and connected when chaos is happening all around us? We prepare, we don't panic. This training and its contents has been uh, co-built alongside communities from LGBTQ human rights defenders in Myanmar to land rights defenders, Maori land rights defenders in Aotearoa doing the occupation of Ihumatao, to indigenous water protectors in Standing Rock, to the Black community of Ferguson during the Ferguson uprising following the murder of Michael Brown by Darren Wilson. What we're going to be sharing are ancestral technologies, are tools that folks already use. If you exist at the intersection of multiple marginalized identities, you're most likely already using these tools. This may not be new, and we're just putting name and surfacing that you have the tools that you need to keep yourself and others safe. Throughout, you're going to be seeing this icon, and we'd like to invite you to grab your pen and paper to go ahead and jot it down. We're going to be practicing some old school OPSEC and really having stuff analog. We're not sharing anything in the chat unless it is a question. So, what did I mean by choosing your own adventure? So for folks that are in this space right now, you either already have your role, either as an observer, community defense and protection, remote support, or protest safety. I'd like to invite you to choose one of these hats that you're going to be looking at the training from that perspective throughout. So if you are a constitutional observer that's on the ground and have been doing this, and you want to stay within that, that's totally fine. If you are someone that has been on the ground and you're recognizing I need to actually take some time to stay at home to recoup my energy, we want to make sure that folks feel that you can give yourself permission to do that as well. And for folks that can't be quote unquote on the ground, if you are undocumented, if you are disabled, if you have been brutalized by the state, you always can do remote support, which is, I feel, one of the most vital roles and something that I've learned from disabled organizers like Alice Wong, may she always be glorious, who passed away 2 months ago. If you don't know Alice Wong, please check out her work. She is a badass disabled organizer, along with Mia Mingus and Stacey Milburn Park and other disabled organizers. So that's around remote support. If you're like, actually, I can serve my community best by taking information and sharing it with observers on the ground, that might be the role you want to take on. And then lastly, protest safety. If you've gone out to a protest as a street medic, or if you are training to be a street medic, if you've gone out to a protest just to be a buddy for someone else, you'd want to take on that role. And you'll be seeing the slide throughout, so it'll be a gentle reminder to put your hat on for that specific role. Before we completely jump into things, I'd like to invite us to just take a few collective breaths together to give yourself permission to lower your shoulders. Go ahead and grab a water, snack, or comfy blanket. If you need to step away at any point, that is completely okay. We are here to expand our window of tolerance and not to re traumatize ourselves. So today you'll be leaving with the OODA loop as a crisis decision making tool, a better understanding of your window of tolerance and how to use it as a self assessment tool on the ground and remotely, and a deeper understanding of your survival responses and your survival tools. Situational awareness is an ancestral technology. What I mean by that is these are the epigenetic tools that have been left and given to us by our ancestors. I'm Filipino. My people come from the Austronesians that traversed areas of the Pacific way before there was European colonizers were starting that. We utilize situational awareness by understanding the positions of the stars in relation to ourselves. Situational awareness is something we all practice, even on a day to day. As a New Yorker, if I'm trying to get from First Avenue, or if I'm trying to get from one side of the east side of Times Square to the west side, I'm definitely going to have my situational awareness on. If you have ever moved down the street, your situational awareness is on. Once again, this is not new. This is us just surfacing that and reinforcing that you have those tools to keep yourself and others safe. Situational awareness is a toolbox to identify threats and mitigate their mitigation measures. And essentially, it is mindfulness in action. So, the first tool that we're going to be talking about when it comes to situational awareness is something called the OODA loop. The OODA loop has existed time immemorial in many cultures. And here, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going through the OODA loop as a method to be able to move through a crisis situation when you are pushed outside of your window of tolerance. We'll be talking about your window of tolerance momentarily, but I'd like to just invite you to, once again, have your specific hat on. And we're going to be going through some videos that we're going to be inviting you to move through the OODA loop. I'll be sharing what each of the steps are and what that can look like. And in this process, we'll be inviting you to jot it down. But before we get into the OODA loop, I also wanted to share the holistic check-in. This is one of the tools that we'll be going more deeply into as a assessment tool that you can utilize. It is a self or peer-to-peer assessment tool. Anyone who consents to mutually utilizing it is folks that can use it. The times that you can utilize it is on the ground, pre and post action, remotely. The reason that we utilize it is to reinforce our agency and autonomy. The holistic check-in is a tool that I developed on the ground in Ferguson with Black organizers when we were dodging multiple agents of the state, moving away from LRADs, moving through clouds of tear gas, supporting aunties and grandmas to get babies out of harm's way. The holistic check-in is essentially a way that we can, in real time, assess what our specific uh, needs are uh, by um, by checking in with one another. And it's very context specific. When we utilize it on the ground, it's very matter of fact. So when I developed this in 2014 and was using it with the Amnesty International human rights observers that were in Ferguson, with one of our head of delegations, I had held space and went through the process, and they shared that they had realized, that they're feeling exhausted, that they haven't, that they're really dehydrated because they're not peeing, that they are so stressed out, that they're experiencing a backache. So basically, it's a way to help them reflect on what their specific needs are without the expectation of the person asking to fulfill those needs. One thing that violence does to us, whether it's perpetrated by the state or non-state actors, is it momentarily deprives us of our agency and autonomy. And by naming what we are experiencing in our bodies and what we need in the moment, we begin to reclaim that. And for everyone that has registered, you will get a copy of a checklist for the holistic check-in and a step-by-step process on how you can utilize it. So if you haven't already, go ahead and grab your pen and paper. You're going to put on your specific hat, whether that's as an observer, community defense and protection, remote support, or protest safety. So what I will be doing is I'm going to be acting as a remote support person. You are about to go into an action scenario, which is going to be a simulation. And I'm going to invite you to write down on your sheet of paper your responses. Once again, you're only writing them down. You're not dropping them in the chat. So this is before even going to an action. I have uh, done my own self-assessment and I have the capacity to hold space. I will ask you, may I get your consent to ask the 4 questions on the holistic check-in? And in this scenario, you have said yes, and we'll work through it together. So what I'd like to do is to just invite you to just take one moment and maybe 2 breaths where you are scanning through your body from wherever your body touches the sacred earth all the way up and utilizing each breath to scan. You are noticing, and noticings are non-judgmental observations that help you to assess what your specific needs are in that moment. So you're about to go into an action that is potentially tense. I'd like to invite you to write down, what are you feeling physically right now? Once again, what are you feeling physically right now? And when you're ready, moving on to the next question is, what are you feeling emotionally right now? What are you feeling emotionally right now? Third question is, what are you feeling energetically right now? Sometimes it helps for folks to have a 0 to 10 scale. For other folks, if you are a creative, an artist, someone that things more visually, I'd like to invite you to think about your energy as a palette of paints that are made up of different colors and textures. And you're going to be painting um, an empty canvas with those emotions. So feel free to either choose whichever way um, is most supportive, whether it is a scale or whether it's a painting. What are you feeling energetically right now? And then lastly, the most important question is, what does support look like for you right now before going into an action? Once again, what does support look like for you right now before going to an action? All right. So that was the pre-action holistic check-in to help you identify what you're experiencing in the moment, to maybe set a baseline. And we'll be doing a post-action holistic check-in momentarily. So, content warning. In the video that I'm going to show is state violence against protesters. This is footage I took on the ground during the Dante Wright protests of April 2021 in Minnesota. This was intentionally chosen because it replicates the tactics that are being used by the state without re-traumatizing folks with a direct example of ICE's brutality. Please enter the simulation with your role in mind. And once again, this is a simulation. If you, there will be sound. If you find that uh, you're at a point where this is going to be too much or too overwhelming, you are very much invited to and very welcome to mute your sound and arrive back when we go through the OODA loop. Sorry, just one moment. I think I'm having some technical issues on my end. So we're going to just go backwards in time. So what we saw was this a scene from the Dante Wright protests, and I just want you to take note of what you're feeling, experiencing uh, right now in this moment. So you went into that without having the framework of the OODA loop. What we'll be going over is step by step how to utilize this as a decision-making tool in a crisis situation. The first step of the OODA loop is observe. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? What are you smelling? What are you feeling? The what are you feeling part is so very important. As you've probably experienced at one point in your life, you've gone somewhere where there is a sense of like, I need to get out of here right now. It is unsafe for me to be in this space. You always want to listen to that. That is your body processing information that you have subconsciously collected. With what are you seeing? If you're an observer, being able to take in as much information as possible is really important. So taking note of what are you seeing all around you, what are you hearing, what are you smelling. And when you're in observation mode, you are cool, calm, collected, and connected. And you are not necessarily anticipating threats, but you're taking in information from all points throughout. So once again, the first step in the OODA loop is observation. So taking in all that information around you. The next step of the OODA loop is orient. What is a baseline or what is normal for this situation? What would be an anomaly or something that sticks out? So what is a baseline or what is normal for the situation can change moment by moment. It's it's important to just be able to track what is happening with a particular action or a situation, whether it's escalating or de-escalating. Once you set what is normal for the situation, it helps to be able to identify when something is sticking out. For instance, if you have your protest safety hat on and you are part of a protest safety team that is watching out for potential fascist violence against protesters, especially from non-state actors, you might notice that everyone in the action is smiling, is carrying banners. And if you see someone who is constantly darting in and out, who may be aggravating some protesters, who may be trying to um, um, escalate a situation, it's important to just maintain uh, a noticing of that individual. They can be someone that's having a emotional response, which is completely okay. But you always just want to make sure to track, not because we're trying to police or surveil, but to see what support can look like, right? Because if someone is at the action and the baseline is that everyone is uh, focused on marching from point A to point B, and someone tries to veer the march in another direction, that could be an anomaly. So you've observed, taken in all the information around you, you've oriented where you have basically come up with a baseline, which helps you identify an anomaly. And that then helps you to get to the third part of the OODA loop, which is decide what is your plan of action? What is your goal in this moment? And once again, before we started the OODA loop exercise, you had already chosen one of the hats to wear. In this situation, at the Dante Wright protest, I was specifically there as a street medic to be able to support folks that have been targeted by the state and had commonly used munitions used against them. That ranges from everything from foam baton rounds to pepper balls to beanbag rounds to tear gas to pepper spray. And you might notice that some of these names are pretty innocuous almost, and that's very intentional by the state. We know that these are called less than lethal munitions. There have been many times when the munitions have caused extreme injury or even death. So when you are going through the OODA loop and you're observing, taking in all the information around you, and you notice that the crowd is marching this way in this situation, as you saw earlier, folks are watching state security at the Brooklyn Park Police Department. The the baseline was basically protesters were chanting and marching, and the state security was watching us with their munitions pointed at some folks. Some of them had them down. So you want to decide as a street medic in that moment. My plan of action was to support anyone that might be targeted by the state with a commonly used munition. And thinking through what is your goal in this moment. My goal was to get folks out of there safely and quickly. If anything happened to pop off, which it did. So as we were observing throughout, we noticed that there was an escalation of chants in the crowd that was caused by um, we didn't actually see, but we saw that heard there's an escalation in chants by the crowd, which was then responded by state security using pepper balls, tear gas, and flashbang grenades against the protesters. The folks that were here were hit in the legs, and once I had been able to come up with my decision point, my plan of action, it was to provide support to make sure that none of their bones were broken, that they were able to get out of there, to take care of any wounds, to flush out their eyes if they had been hit by tear gas or pepper spray, and to get them out. So once again, we observed, we oriented, we decided on what the plan of action is, and then lastly is to act. What do you need to do in this moment to keep yourself and others safe? You want to do it and then go back to observe. The reason that the OODA loop is a loop is because you don't turn it off until you are home safe, and you activate it as soon as you're on the ground or about to be on the ground. So I'm going to show the video again, and I invite you to think through the OODA loop and jot down on your sheet of paper what you're observing, what is the baseline, what is your plan of action in that role, and how would you act? So the OODA loop, once again, stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. You turn it on and you turn it off after an action. The reason that you turn it on is you are intentionally telling your body, your mind, and your heart that I am going to be scanning for threats that are on the horizon, likely threats that are on the horizon. And the reason you turn it off in a conscious way is in order to be able to mitigate any hypervigilance to your nervous system. How many times have you gone to an action, a protest, an observation, a constitutional observation action, or anything else where as soon as you got home, where you felt like you were supposed to be safe, you could still hear the chanting, you could still hear the screaming, you can still hear and almost feel like you were there. That is our nervous systems going into a state of hypervigilance, replaying it over and over again. It is of vital importance that we turn on and off our OODA loop. And I'll be sharing some of our home safe protocols that we utilize with safety teams on the ground as a process to be able to not just decompress, but to turn off our OODA loop. So, what I'd like us to do for about 2 minutes is we're going to reorient our situational awareness to self regulate in real time. What does this mean and what does this look like, and why are we even doing this together? Even though what you just saw was a video or a simulation, our bodies cannot tell the difference between stimuli, whether it is real or a simulation. So it's really important for us to, once again, engage our agency and autonomy to get back to a state of regulation. One of the pieces of our get home protocol. So for the safety teams that I've worked with for the last 15 years, one of the things that we do is we will let everyone know, whether it's like a text thread or the email thread or now a signal chat, that they are home safe. And that then cascades into the 5 beautiful things exercise. So when they get home safe from an action, They know that they turn off their situational awareness, they turn off their OODA loop, and they practice a five beautiful things exercise. So, what this is, and we're going to be doing this together, is I'm going to give us 2 minutes as a collective. You're welcome to move around your space. If you're in your room, apartment, house, garden, I invite you to do that. So, what you're going to be doing is rather than scanning for threats on the horizon, you're going to be scanning for beautiful things. You're going to allow your gaze to soften. And as a soft gay myself, I use this a lot, but I'm bummed. Um, so you're going to allow your gaze to soften. You're not staring down and looking for beautiful things, but rather you're going to allow your gaze to soften and move through your space and find five new beautiful things that you may not have noticed in the past. That could be a letter that you haven't read yet from a loved one. That could be um, you know, uh, a flower that you had bought for yourself a while back that's in the corner. So what we're going to do is we're going to give it about a couple minutes for everyone to practice finding five beautiful things in your space. And your time starts now. And if it's easier for some folks or more accessible for some folks to scan around or listen to or feel for, please feel free to do that. You're basically using your observational skills and organs to reorient yourself into the recognition that you are safe. So we'll do this for about another minute. And when you're ready, I'd like to invite folks to come back into either your seats, your space, and back into this training. And feel free to jot down your five beautiful things or just keep them in mind. So once again, this was part of our get home safe protocol. You've told yourself, I'm turning off my situational awareness. I am no longer scanning for threats that are on the horizon. I am reorienting my observational skills to be able to identify beautiful new things I may not have noticed before, to remind myself that I am safe, to remind my body that I am safe. And now we're going to be doing a post action uh, holistic check-in. You're coming into this next part with the same hat on, whether you're an observer, community defense and protection, remote support, or protest safety. So once again, I'm going to be acting as your remote support um, safety person, and I'm going to be going through these four questions with you. But before we do that, I just want to invite us to get into a space where we are aware and comfortable. If it's helpful, you can look at the ground in front of you at a 45-degree angle, just allowing your eyes to rest a bit. And what we're going to be doing is another set of breaths where you are breathing through your nose and longer out your mouth. In your nose and out your mouth. Through your nose and out your mouth. And now I want you to intentionally imagine light at wherever you are sacred body meets the sacred earth, and bring that scanning light up from below, up through your knees, your hips, solar plexus, heart, shoulder, arms, and then to the top of your mind, at the top of your skull. I just want to be able to have you give yourself a moment of pause to reflect and to assess. I'll be asking you 4 questions, and I would like to ask if I can get your consent to ask these questions. And for the purposes of this, you have provided consent. What are you feeling physically right now in your body? What feels tense? What feels nimble? What are your noticings in your body? Is your heart rate at a baseline? Is it elevated? Is your breathing following a pattern? Is it erratic? And all of these are all right. All of this is data and information. The next question is, what are you feeling emotionally right now? And you're invited, once again, to jot this down on your notepad or just take note of it. What are you feeling emotionally right now? The next question is, what are you feeling energetically right now? If a 0 to 10 scale is helpful, go ahead and use that. If imagining yourself at a sunny window, painting with a an easel of paints as that energy onto a blank canvas, go ahead and do that. And then the last and most important question, is what does support look like for you right now? What does support look like for you right now? I've always found that it's helpful to be able to name what support looks like based on my specific needs in that moment. After an action, I usually need to hydrate. After an action, having a long, warm shower with the Dave Dust soundtrack in the background helps me to decompress. And that's what support looks like. Even the act of holding space through a holistic check in could be a level of support. So, lastly, I invite you to write down, what does support look like for you right now?
Kala, there's a question about could you provide examples of emotional and energetic feelings like you did for physical feelings?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. So, after actions, when I some some emotions or some energetic noticings will be that there is my heart is almost like lava or obsidian, and it's just like beating at a higher level. It's beating strongly, but it's still beating at an escalated level. Or I am feeling completely drained where I don't even have a drop of energy left and I'm at 0%. Or I am feeling like everything is possible in this moment because I saw my community protect one another. It can also be I'm feeling grounded and rooted in the earth in this sacred charge to protect my community. I can feel like I have too much energy and I don't know what to do. So, actually, for support, I might go for a quick run. it is so important for us to notice where our energies are, to be able to track in the longer arc of movement to ensure that we do not burn out ourselves, our communities, and that we're able to carry that flame from point to point. I hope that was helpful. So, we are going to take a 2-minute bio break before we get into the next part of our training. So, if folks want to go ahead and um, take a step away, maybe you might want to practice the five beautiful things exercise again, or grab some water. Hot water is lovely. And we're going to be coming back here in about 2 minutes. So please go ahead and grab what you need to take care of yourself. You might want to stretch, use a restroom, grab another snack. And we'll arrive back here in just a minute. All right. So I just want to invite folks to arrive back gently. Take your time. We went through situational awareness. We talked through the OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, and act. We took a look at a couple clips from the Dante Wright protests of 2021 to be able to determine how our role would respond at that moment. And together we practice the holistic check-in, the self or the peer-to-peer assessment tool. I will even use a holistic check-in for myself before going on the ground. Um, in I think for a lot of folks on this call, um, many of us do the work because it's ancestral. Maybe many of us do the work because we have seen what state repression looks like and have been the um, uh, recipients of that blunt violence. And it's important for us to be able to take a moment to self-reflect. Um, Let me go through my holistic check-in for myself. And if I recognize that what support looks like for me right now is actually not being on the ground, excuse me, what I will do is offer my energy up to be remote support. So the holistic check-in, once again, is an important tool that we can utilize for ourselves and for others, with others, to be able to make sure that we have the capacity to do this work in the long run. It's been often said that this is a marathon and not a sprint. And when we talk about keeping each other safe, part of what that looks like is making sure that folks know that they can give themselves permission to rest. If there is anything that I have learned from Black and Indigenous feminists, it is that the intentional um, eroding of our nervous system, the stealing of our energy, is a function of a settler colonial state. It is a subtle and many times obvious violence that we find ourselves in. And it is of vast importance for us to do that self reflection, to take a moment to say, today, what support looks like for me to be able to do this in the long term is to watch heated rivalry for the fifth time in a row, to get back to the cottage with my boys and to have a nice sparkling glass of ginger ale with a tuna melt. So it's important for us to do those self reflections. And if you have done that self reflection and you have said, you know what, I am good to go, I am going to be an observer on the ground. Now I'd like to offer some tactical regulation tools and frameworks that you can utilize in your own work. We'll be talking about the window of tolerance, survival responses, survival tools, and we've already shared the holistic check-in. So once again, we're going to be choosing our adventure. Please go ahead and grab your pen and paper, and you're going to put your hat on again, whether you're an observer, community defense and protection, remote support, or protest safety. The window of tolerance was developed in the late 90s by a American psychologist by the name of Dr. Spiegel. And it is essentially a tool that helps us understand when we are cool, calm, collected, and connected. Your window of tolerance is basically your comfort zone, as we know, as commonly known. And when we are pushed outside of our window of tolerance, that means that there are multiple stressors that have pushed us outside of our window of tolerance. There's two primary responses. There's hyperarousal and hypoarousal. I think of them as hyperarousal is speeding up. This is when you go into fight or flight. And hypoarousal is slowing down of your entire system. This could be freeze or fawn. When we've done these trainings and introduced a window of tolerance to folks that are doing community safety back at the beginning of attacks on Asian elders, many folks that were doing support work recognize that their window of tolerance, when they're pushed outside of it, usually when aggression happens to them, they go into freeze. But if they see someone that looks like their grandparents, they go immediately to fight. It's really important to note that there is not a hierarchy of a correct survival response, which we'll talk about in a bit. But it's really important to understand when we're in our window of tolerance for the uh, direct purpose of being able to widen or expand our window of tolerance to be able to show up for ourselves and others. So once again, when you're in your window of tolerance, you're cool, calm, collected, and connected. When a stressor happens, when a activation point happens, for some folks, an activation point, I'll use an example. In 2008, I was part of a group of about 75 folks that went to Beijing, and we have some of those folks here. Holler Beijing 2008 folks who went to the Beijing Olympics to protest the Chinese government's use of the Olympics as a political tool. And in that action, I was part of the group that did the Bird's Nest Stadium action, Bird's Nest Stadium action right before the opening ceremonies, where we were taken down within 30 seconds by Chinese state police and military, and had bones broken, brutalized, and clearly was pushed outside of our window of tolerance for the next 24 hours as we were waterboarded, put in solitary, and then deported. When we were pushed outside of our window of tolerance, my responses for myself was to go into fawn mode or to freeze mode. This is what I've always used to protect myself. I made myself smaller and made sure that I could respond by either being overly polite or acquiescing. So fawn means being overly polite or sometimes called people pleasing. But when I saw my comrades getting brutalized, I went initially into fight. And even though I had over 8 years of nonviolence de-escalation training, it took everything in me to not want to go in swinging. So our window of tolerance tells us when we're cool, calm, collected, and connected. And when we're pushed outside of our window of tolerance by a particular activation point. So the activation point that I left with that was um, any East Asian appearing cis man in a state security uniform. I immediately went to a place of activation. That's when I was pushed out. And we'll talk about momentarily how do you support yourself and how do folks support each other when we're pushed outside of our window of tolerance. So once again, when you're pushed outside of your window of tolerance, there is hyperarousal or hypoarousal, speeding up, fight or flight, or slowing down, freeze or fawn. The reason that we name our window of tolerance and recognizing when we're cool, calm, collected, connected is to know our survival responses. The four primary that we usually refer to is fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And I need to say it again because we live in a patriarchal society. There is no hierarchy of what is best. Whichever survival response you have utilized is not just uh, yours and the one that works for you, but it's also an ancestral gift. It is how you navigate a situation. And what I'd like to invite folks to do is we're going to do a little bit more journaling in our notebook. Is in your role, I want you to imagine um, that you are at an action, and I'd like for you to write down what your survival response is when aggression happens to you. As I shared earlier, when it happens to me, I usually go into fawn or being overly polite. So let's take a moment to think about and write down what is your survival response when aggression happens to you. Once again, this is in our notebooks and we're not putting them in the chat. So now knowing your primary, you're going to think about your secondary survival response. I'd like to invite you to write down your survival response when you witness aggression happening to others. Like I shared earlier, my primary when it happens to me is fawn, and my secondary when it happens to others is to fight. There is no right or wrong. Whatever your responses are your responses. So we'll take a few more moments to just jot those down. So we talked about the window of tolerance, we talked about our survival responses, and now it's important to recognize that we have survival tools. There are two survival tools that I kind of referenced earlier. One is knowing your activation point. This is sometimes called your trigger. This could be a stressor, but we like to frame it as an activation point. This is something that gets you either into a state of hyperarousal or hypoarousal. So I'd like to invite you to write down what could activate you at an action that you're at with your specific hat on. So, like I shared earlier, if I was in this situation and I'm going to an action in my role as protest safety, I know that I get pushed outside of my window of tolerance when I see an East Asian cis man in a state security uniform. That would be an activation point. And the reason that we identify our activation points and even write it down is to attach an anchor point for us. An anchor point, in essence, is something that grounds you in that moment. It can be something that you provide yourself uh, directly, or it could be something that someone on your team can do or a buddy. When I would work with our um, uh, like our triangle of safety folks, back in 2020, I let them know what my activation point and a couple of my anchor points are I consented to having someone put their hand on my shoulder to help me get back into my window of tolerance where I am cool, calm, collected, and connected. Um, or if we weren't close by one another, seeing each other from across the action, holding eye contact for 3 breaths was another one of my anchor points. So I'd like to invite you to think about when you're activated, what can your team or buddy do to anchor you? It doesn't have to be physical touch base. It's really about how you respond and how you would like to ask for support with your buddy or your team. For some folks, it might be like this action is getting too spicy. We need to go for a walk and process this. I need to process this in my body. For other folks, it might be like I need you to pour really, really cold water on my wrist points or wherever my uh, arteries meet my skin. For some other folks, it might be like, I need a hug. So take a moment to think about your activation point and one anchor point that folks on your team or your buddy can support you on. So if you're an observer and you have been observing the brutality that has been happening in Minneapolis for the last 45 days, and your activation point is seeing these fascists in their Amazon get-ups coming up to your community, you know that's an activation point. You have told your buddy beforehand when you have done your holistic check-in what support looks like in this moment is that if I start yelling, you yell with me, but watch my back. That could be an anchor point. Once again, as Claire said in the beginning, our job is not to police emotions, to to stifle rage. Rage is a sacred emotion. Rage is what ensured our ancestors survived. My ancestors survived through colonization, occupation, and genocide. So honor that. So once again, you're identifying your anchor activation point and your anchor point. Take a few moments to think through what that anchor point can look like. So we talked about our uh, survival responses, our 2 survival tools, your activation point and your anchor point. And now I'd like to introduce or share some strategies to expand your window of tolerance. That ranges like everything from practicing mindfulness or grounding techniques. One thing that I would have our teams do is if we have the space and we're doing an action, trying to think of like in New York, for instance, and we happen to be by Central Park, ending at Killer Columbus Circle. We'll go into the park and just practice walking meditation and mindfulness. Another strategy is self compassion meditation. There is not every activist I have ever met, every organizer I have ever met has been the most critical person of themselves in their life. It's important for us when we are on an observer mission, when if we are providing remote safety support, or if we're there to protect our communities either from the clutches of ICE or during an action from fascists, that we also practice self-compassion for ourselves. We need to reflect the same radical love back on ourselves as we do to the entire community. Another strategy is trauma-informed approaches like EMDR. Another one is understanding your survivor responses, which we went into. Another is boundary setting support. What this can look like is letting folks on your safety team know, letting your buddy know that at 10 p.m., I need to be off of signal. At 8 p.m., I am having dinner and I am going to ask that you and the team not contact me. So having your team support and honor your boundaries is another strategy for expanding your window of tolerance. And then emotional regulation exercises, which can be an entire training unto itself. But I wanted to introduce a few emotional regulation exercises that we have utilized. A lot of them have been developed or really trained with other folks by human rights observers, excuse me, by human rights defenders in the global majority. So, in your regulation toolbox, there is self and co regulation. One form of self regulation is humming. The mere act of humming deep in your chest, where you can feel the vibrations, helps to activate your vagus nerve, where you go back into rest and digest. Another self regulation tool is hand on heart and solar plexus breathing. Sorry, I think I'm hitting my mic. So, having your hand on your heart and over your solar plexus or your belly button, and actually feeling yourself breathing. Another self regulation tool is acupressure. It's accessing points in your body that almost feel a little bit painful, but as soon as you release, you feel better, you feel in your body. When it comes to co regulation, this is basically something that you and your team or your buddy would be doing. One form of co regulation is co breathing. This might be having you back to back with your buddy, where both of you are matching each other's slow and deep breaths. Another co regulation tool would be mirroring movement, even if it's for 3 breaths. And then lastly is mutually consensual touch. I really need a hug. Would it be okay if I got a hug from you? These are just a few, and I'll be sharing um, uh, a host of other tools that have been developed by Capacitar International, which works with folks at the front lines of human rights defense, to everyone that had registered for this training. So we talked through our window of tolerance, survival responses, survival tools, a self and co-regulation toolbox that we can utilize with our team or our buddy. Now, once again, I'd like to invite you to put your hat back on, grab a pen and paper, and I'd like to ask the question. Well, one, we went through the OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, and act. We talked about the window of tolerance, survival responses and survival tools, and self and co regulation tools. I'd like you to choose one of these, and we'll take maybe a minute to write down how would you apply it in your role as an observer in doing community defense and protection, in remote support, or in protest safety. We'll give that about 4 to 5 deep breaths. So jot that down. How will you apply one of these tools in your specific role? If you're finding that you're maybe stuck in trying to figure that out, don't worry. Everyone will get a copy of this deck, and you'll be able to have some time to be able to jot it down for yourself or even share it with your team, your community, or your buddy. So I just want to close the formal training part with this quote by Grace Lee Boggs, an American philosopher, an organizer that was one of the um, first within our community to start building bridges of solidarity between the Black and Asian community as it pertains to our civil and human rights. Grace Lee Boggs. The only way to survive is by taking care of one another. I think we're seeing that very directly, and we have been seeing that from community members in Minneapolis, from folks in LA, from folks in Chicago, from communities around the country. We've been seeing that since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, where mutual aid groups sprang up to provide support. We saw that at the um, uprising following the murder of George Floyd, where communities took care of one another in the face of state repression. We continue to see that. If there's one thing that I have learned in the time I've done this since the late 90s, is that we are the ones that truly keep us safe. No one is coming to save us, and we don't need anyone to save us because we have community and solidarity. And that is what has ensured our ancestors' survival. That is what has been passed down to us. And that is a sacred charge that we hold now in the face of fascism that has always existed in this country. It's important for us to not only understand what is happening on the ground, but also to share this wisdom. And I am really honored to be able to invite Marianne Quiros, who is the founder, executive director of Indigenous Roots in Minneapolis. Marianne is a phenomenal organizer, leader, culture worker, and I don't think I ever really got to thank Marianne for this, but during um, the the lead up to the Derek Chauvin trial, when I was in Minneapolis with Nonviolent Peace Force, there was a moment when I was recognizing how outside of my window of tolerance I was, and Marianne had organized, along with Indigenous Roots, a community space where we were able to see um, Indigenous dancers perform, where we were able to um, make uh, flower baskets together. And it is so vital in this moment to be able to look to those that are building resilience in a way that is outside of the capitalistic heteropatriarchal system, where it reinforces and reminds us that we're here for each other. So I'm going to stop share and invite Marianne to the space.
Hello, mabuhay. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, and I will try to find you. We're
I'm,
going to highlight you for the.
I'm gonna try video too, but my connection, I'm actually currently traveling, so hopefully you can hear me well. Oh, I can't start. It says video is disabled. So it's okay, but I can open up and chat as well. So my name
Try
is,
it again
oh,
now. Your video might work now. You should be able
okay. Thank you, Claire. Salamat. Hey everyone, mabuhay. Pangalan ko si Marian Liheraldi Quiros. Taga sa Pilipinas ako. Maraming salamat sa imbitan niyo dito sa akin. And so I just want to say my name is Marianne Quiros, and I just want to say thank you for having me here. I'm actually traveling, and so I'm just really grateful to share this space with comrades and folks in the movement. So let me know if you can't hear me very well, but I'm immigrated in to Minnesota in 1989, and fast forward, I'm the co-founder and director of Indigenous Roots Cultural Arts Center, and so we do everything. If you put it in a grant, they said that we do culturally relevant community response. And so we make sure that we lead always with and for and by our Black, Brown, Native, Indigenous relatives, comrades, artists, culture bearers. And so, what I do want to just share today is, you can Google us, Indigenous Roots, but I want to echo a lot of what has been shared already in this training. We started, we've been doing immigration work. I've been doing immigration rights work, human rights work since we were in high school, my partner and I. And so what we're seeing right now, what is happening right now is unprecedented since I've lived in the United States. And so what we do, as I think it's just naturally innate in us, and I should say myself, as a caretaker, I come from a long line of matriarchs, of Filipina Pinay matriarchs, indigenized, who are actually, of course, nurses and caretakers. And so that's just kind of how I move and lead, is with a lot of care and a lot of love. And so when we started responding to the ICE raids and continue to respond to the ICE raids. It started with a small group of folks, and it's huge now, right? And we've been able to. What I tell people is, organize in your local neighborhoods. It's always good to help out in different places. And if you don't think that ICE is very present in your neighborhood, then yes, go to the nearest one and mobilize. And everyone has a role in the revolution. I want to say everyone has a role in the revolution. And I'm going to keep saying that because my children have a role in the revolution. I'm not in Minnesota, but our third born, our 17-year-old, co-led a student walkout just this week. And there were hundreds, if not, we estimated about 3,000 students that walked out last Wednesday. And so it was an honor that they trusted me to be able to organize with them remotely. And it was an honor because I didn't ask my 17-year-old to lead or do it, but they knew, because they've been raised, that their liberation is tied to everyone else's liberation, that their well-being is tied to everyone else's well-being. And so it makes me proud that we're seeding the next generation of activists and organizers and activators. And so, whenever a young person says they want to help, let them. And of course, we have to create safe spaces and caring spaces for them to grow in and also to learn in. And so, what we do right now in our network is, everybody has to work. That's why it's called network. You got to work. And so you're either in the rapid response team, or you are in the community patrol watch. You're patrolling the streets, walking, driving, biking, however you feel safe to do so. And then we have a community care pod. And so that's a lot of post-raid care that we do, making sure folks, and we're not just handing out, here's a phone number, go call. We're literally doing it ourselves, where we're advocating for them, getting them legal funds, connecting them to legal work. Right now, a lot of law firms are like, we don't even have time to fill out paperwork. Can you help fill the paperwork out for them, and we'll review it? So we're doing DOPAs, we're doing asylum forms. And so just really proud of our team and our network of neighbors. And some of these folks have never even gotten involved before. It's like the first time they're finally standing up, and because it's all hitting us at home. And so I just want to say how grateful I am to all of you in this training for finding your role in the revolution, or maybe you already know your role in the revolution, but just we all need refreshers. I need refreshers, and we all need to get reconnected and stay connected and stay grounded. So for us, just right now, we're building community pantries and community closets throughout the city. We've created raid bins and placed them in different organizations. The raid bins come with masks and water and gloves and first aid kits and bullhorns and whistles. And so if you have the resources, create yourself a raid bin. We've also told people to create go bags. And go bags is stuff that if you're trying to show up, make sure you have a go bag with you at all times, And so these are practical things, but can be really useful. And take care of yourselves. I showed up at a couple raids, and then I was followed and surveilled by agents for 2-3 days right after one of the last raids I went to. And I have to keep in mind that I have young children, and it's my duty as their mama to keep them safe as well. So it's okay to step back, to assess, And as you know, everything that was shared today, I just really appreciate Kalaya'an for bringing me here, and for Ethan and everyone else. So I'm just really grateful, and we'll see you all soon in the streets and connect soon. So sending you all an abundance of safety and protection and love and care. And I'm gonna flip it so you guys can see how amazing Mexico is. So in here, Mexican folks are walking around free, not getting chased by ICE. So, but we'll see you all soon. Take care.
Thank you so much, Marianne. That was wonderful, and we really appreciate you jumping on to share what Indigenous Roots has been practicing on the ground, not just for the last 45 days, or really for years. I dropped the link to Indigenous Roots donation page if folks want to support with some of those material needs for immigrant communities that Indigenous Roots is providing. And now I'd like to hand the mic back to Claire, and just like thank everyone for spending your time with us, and your energy and dedication to the protection of our communities. Claire, back to you.
Uh, Marianne, thank you so much for joining us, and for your work on the ground. Just deep appreciation for everything that you have been building and guiding, and then for taking the time to be with us today, even while you're in this beautiful place. We have a few minutes if there are a couple burning questions that people want to drop in the chat. We are going to start moving towards close, but Marianne has offered to be available for questions via text. I think that the questions people had dropped in the chat while Kala was leading the training have at least been partly addressed, but this is your moment if there's something that you wanted to hear more about, or that you were hoping was going to be part of the training today, which either we can respond to, or we might point you towards some other resources for that. Obviously, there's no training where everything fits. So we are also going to be leaving you today um, with mailing out this recording with the slides that we went through today, as something that you can take back to your crew, to the folks you work with, to talk about how do you want to apply this? What are you already doing that we talked about today, that either this helped you think about a way to level up, or a way to share out farther with more of the people that you work with and maybe haven't been working with as closely, but could there be opportunities to build that out a little farther? Kala has an amazing link tree that if you haven't already seen it, we got to send to you, because there's incredible resources in there. I've been using your resources for years, Kala. Thank you so much for the work that you've done to put them into an accessible form. And we really want folks here to get to benefit from that. And we know that y'all are doing a lot. So we also were imagining that we might try to end early so that you could go back out into the world and do the things you're doing. Um, Looks like we're going to be able to do that. And before we go, I just want to invite folks to, if there is something that you want to drop in the chat, again, not personal information about you or your group, but something that you heard today, either from Marianne or Kala, that made you think, that you can take with you as guidance, that inspired you. God, I also might have gotten like a little bit teary hearing about the 3,000 student walkout, and what Marianne was naming about the rules for everyone, including our children. Something that you want to try out in the streets, something that you heard today that put words to something you've been feeling but not quite able to name. Want to encourage folks to take a moment to drop something like that in the chat. And I see a question here around, has anyone been successful in engaging with ICE agents on a friendly person-to-person basis? Or is that simply not possible given the current situation? I have I have some well, I have one piece of one answer to that, but Kala, I'll give it to you to respond first to that.
Actually, thank you. Um, yeah. So, what defines success, right? I think that's what's really important. I think a lot of times people want to de-escalate ICE agents or state security, and one thing I have trained on, and one thing that I have learned for 3 decades is you cannot de-escalate anyone that you are not in right relationship with. I think that if you're thinking about engaging ICE agents to leave, I don't know of excuse me, friendly examples necessarily. And I would be hesitant to have folks, uh, uh, engage in that way unless they're specifically trained. But let me hand it to Claire for more on that question.
I co-sign that. I want to bring folks' attention to what Marianne said about ending up in dialogue and negotiating taking one person instead of an entire family at one raid. And I think about this through the framework of I'm someone who comes from the GI resistance movement. A lot of my work over the last 20 years has been working with active duty military members and veterans around refusing orders. And what we do know is that historically, that does not work in the same way with cops, ICE, the other entities under DHS. I think it's really important to not come in with false expectations that then could put you or your neighbors into a more dangerous situation. And at the same time, this is an organizing project that some people are trying to figure out. Some people are trying to figure out, is it possible in any, given moment to break off any of the people who have chosen to take on this incredibly violent and awful role from what they're doing. And I think that is an open question, but I think it's very careful. It's very important to proceed with caution in that situation. Yeah. Anything else that you want to add, Marianne or Kala? I know this is a question that a lot of people have been asking.
I did a couple. There was another raid, a different situation raid. They showed up at one of our mom and pop shop stores owned by a Colombian family, and you know, the obviously a majority of them were not very kind and very aggressive, but there was one young woman from Texas that was like, and you can tell she was even scared, right? So she had her vest on and she's just like, hey, we're just trying to find, like this person, and then we'll leave the store alone. Like I'll ask my boss to like pull our team away. And I was like, the thing is, do you have a warrant? Like, who is this person? What is their name? Like, I'm sorry, we are not just going to hand over people to you. Like, that's not what we do. And then, we locked arms. We did our human chain link in front of the door, the grocery store door, so they couldn't get in. And I know she was trying to talk really in a gentle manner with the owner, but she was, lower in the food chain. And I know she didn't want her own people harmed. And she also chose to become an agent. You know what I mean? It's like you didn't have to do this. You're choosing to do this. And so um there are like some that really don't want violence to happen, but a majority of them, if anything, like 95% of the agents I've dealt with in the last 3 months and the raids that I've shown up to are aggressive and trained to not care about your safety, any of our safety. They're there to do one job. They're bounty hunters, and that's what they're trained to do. So I would just say, like what was shared already is just observe, feel the vibe of the place, and your safety is a priority, the safety of others, of who you're protecting. And a lot of folks that have shown up at raids, I get it that they're angry. And one of the raids that I was at, I was like, hey, I can't hear the family that's inside the house, because there was probably like 100 of us by then, including the agents and the St. Paul police. I was like, I can't hear what the family wants. You guys need to like take it down, or so I can hear them. And so it was nice when you're in community with people who show up, because they do tend to follow, like, okay, this is what the goal is: protecting the family. The goal is protecting who the agents are persecuting. And so it's good to be in communication, and also to just be like, hey, like, know what your role is when you're showing up there. And so that's what I just want to share that part.
I think that piece is so key. And I mean, all of the things that we're practicing today are towards the how do we stay focused on what is our commitment in this moment. And when it's about ICE raids, it is about protecting the people they're targeting. And we can keep reorienting to that as we're trying to make decisions. The only other thing I would add here is I think there's a way to just take the lesson from how we think about safety teams and safety at actions where you never want to create a situation where the people who are aggressive and violent are literally cornered. We always want to create a way out for them. And that's true structurally. We want a way out for all of these agents to stop doing what they're doing, to actually like leave those structures. But what we want first is for them to leave our neighborhoods. So we need the literal physical ways to create exit routes and then get them out whenever we can do that. Because people will get more violent and dangerous when they are literally cornered and don't have a way out. Egress on every level. That's right. Egress out of these violent systems. And right in the moment, here and now, egress out of people's neighborhoods, out of people's homes. Yeah. I'm not seeing other questions that are being shared, but I want to really appreciate what folks are speaking to in the chat around how, I mean, I see people writing to different versions of just how many different roles there are, how much all of us are needed in different ways. And I think we both want to really lift up and love on and support the courage of people who are in the front lines in places where they are closer to those confrontations and that piece of the defense work, and to make sure our folks are protected and supported in that. And we also don't have to like dismiss any of the other work that is part of making that possible. We don't have to valorize one piece of community defense work. And I hope folks are really taking that coming from today, is that we are really in our deepest strengths when we stay committed to each other's safety. And there is so much community power behind the really visible moments where tons of people show up in the parking lot. And there's so much collective strength that ICE leaves and stops harassing that solo person who they were going after, who they probably would have kidnapped if there hadn't been tons of people out in that moment. Like, that's community power, but also so are the people who are creating the raid bins and the community pantries. There's so many pieces to community safety because it means fortifying our communities on every level. So those of you who are bringing groceries to folks' houses, you are increasing community safety. The people who are building and supplying the raid bins are community safety workers. And that means there's a lot for all of us to do. In the resources we'll send, want to encourage you to really look at both what, skills and resources do you all have that you can share, and what are some that you need, and where can you get them? There's a lot of trainings happening. Maybe your group already got trained on building safety teams, but maybe you want to get more trained up in dealing with increased surveillance. Maybe you could help organize a training on resisting grand juries for folks in your town. Maybe you are, or maybe you have a trusted friend who's like really good at digital security, who could actually offer to help some of the folks in your town who might be really overstretched already and could use help, like getting their phones more cleaned up before they're back out in the street, or helping think about their overall digital safety or safety plans. Because we really want to have each other's backs on this, because it is us who are keeping each other safe on every level. And Kala, this is especially for you, but for anyone who has been drinking in radical joy from heated rivalry, I want to borrow some words to say, yes, this is scary, and we are brave. And this is what we got to do. So we are going to close up for today. Any last things, Marianne or Kala, that you want to share? I'm also going to drop our emails into the chat.
I just want to say thank you so much to everyone, and just this too shall pass, right? Like everything in history, we will see, we'll get to the other side of this. And for the sake of our young people and also ourselves, right? We have to be able to see and feel beyond the now. We have to be able to see and feel beyond the now. We have to be able to still do our ceremonies and hold them and create, like you said, create joy. So just thank you so much, and honored to be in this moment in history with all of you.
Oh, Marianne is always so amazing. Claire, thank you so much. I also dropped a resource that I recently learned about called the Activist Checklist. It is a very accessible and easy to navigate resource that covers everything from personal safety plans as an activist to digital safety and security. So if you're like, what's something that I can share with my community? It's in there as well. I also dropped the Indigenous Roots donation page. Please support organizations that are on the ground, keeping communities safe. And a huge thank you to Claire, to Nadia, to Sam, and to folks behind the scenes that have been supporting this, and to all of you for keeping not just your community safe, but really envisioning a world where we are where we're safer, where things are more just, and where all of us can enact our human rights without fear of reprisal. I'm going to hand back to Claire, my amazing co-conspirator and co-trainer for this training.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe, stay strong. We'll be in touch. We'll send you resources, and we'll see you in the streets and at the raid bins and the community pantries. Take care.